league roster this late in the year, let alone make an impact. When he was called up to fill in for injured reliever Steve Crawford, he figured he would be back in Pawtucket, the Sox' top minor league club, within a few weeks. There was no reason to think otherwise. A starter everywhere. In college, where he helped the University of Texas Longhorns win the 1983 College World Series, in the minors, and during 7 of his first 15 appearances in the majors, Calvin was still getting adjusted to coming out of the pen. The Sox felt that's where he belonged. He wasn't in a position to argue. He'd pitched very well in Pawtucket, with 12 saves, but let's face it, Pawtucket was not Boston. Besides, the Red Sox didn't call him up to close games. They needed him for middle relief, to eat up innings to spare the other relievers. Something happened to change what they had in store for him. Calvin began to throw strikes, tons of them, and they could not have come at a better time. He saved a game in August against the Kansas City Royals, and 2 more games a week later against the Detroit Tigers. Goodbye Pawtucket, hello Fenway Park. The job of closer was essentially his, and he made the most of it. I was surprised, Calvin remembered. But at the time, the Red Sox were looking for a spark, and I was the spark. You ride the hot hand, and I stayed hot pretty much the entire time I was there after the All-Star break. He sure did. Even on the occasions he blew the save, he won the game regardless. His only 2 defeats came after he'd entered a tie game. More than possessing the right pitches to be a top closer, Calvin appeared to possess the right persona, and that was just as critical. I went out there and threw as hard as I could, as long as I could, he said, and I put things behind me the next day. Want some proof? Just look at what occurred in back-to-back games in Anaheim against the California Angels in early October. At stake was the American League pennant, the winner moving on to the World Series. On the night of Game 4 of the championship series, Calvin had come in with 1 out in the 9th. The Sox were ahead 3-1, but the Angels had men on first and second. After Gary Pettis hit a double to make it a 1-run contest, Calvin issued an intentional walk to load the bases. Allow 1 more hit, and the game would in all likelihood be over. No worries. Calvin promptly struck out Bobby Grich and threw his heater to get to a 1-2 count on Brian Downing. He was now only a strike away from pulling the Sox even in the best-of-7 series at 2 games apiece, meaning that no matter what happened in Game 5, the teams would head back to Boston for Game 6 and, if necessary, Game 7. Gedman called for another heater. The fastball was Calvin's best pitch. No one threw the ball harder, except perhaps for his college and current teammate and close friend Roger Clemens. Downing, while an accomplished hitter, would have a tough time making good contact. We'll never know. Calvin waved Gedman off and threw the curve, which hit Downing to force in the tying run. The Angels went on to win the game in the 11th inning and assume a 3-1 lead in the series. Calvin took the loss. It was something I hadn't felt before, he said. He also took the blame. As he sat in the dugout and shed some tears, the other players tried to prevent the cameras from showing his emotions. A few even suggested he go to the trainer's room to avoid reporters. That wasn't Calvin. I always believed in facing the music, he said, and I wasn't going to have someone write something that wasn't true. As memorable as the loss was, it was what took place after the game that stands out. While he rested in his hotel room that night, he opened his favorite book, the Bible. Calvin routinely read the Bible before going to sleep, 1 chapter at a time. It so happened that where he'd left off the night before was Romans chapter 5, verse 3, a passage dealing with life's tribulations and how they teach us about patience and perseverance. We rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope, and hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. I read that, and I went, "You've got to be kidding me," Calvin said. That was the first sign. The second was when the phone rang several minutes later. Calvin was so naive he didn't know enough to have the hotel receptionist intercept any incoming calls. Thank goodness he didn't. A fireman based in Pebble Beach, California, a complete stranger, was calling to let him know that everyone at his station had been praying for him. Calvin thanked the fireman and went to sleep. He felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. The following day, he came into the game in the 11th inning, Boston up 7-6. The Sox should have been in the clubhouse by then, packing their bags for the winter.